Vladimir Putin announced that there would be 160,000 more troops being called up. There is this massive increase of Russian forces wanting to join the front lines. Despite all of these talks between the United States and Russia, Russia has been accelerating and escalating on the front lines.
I would say that Russia slowed down the pace of their operations for about 6 weeks, 2 months, right? Now, part of that was due to the mud season, the Rasputitsa, that slows down, limits to some degree offensive opportunities. The Kiev regime also launched several counterattacks, significant attempts at counterattacks south and west of Pokrovsk, back into Toretsk, and in a couple of other places. Now, these were not a serious attempt, which is, fantasy to retake these territories. More of these were time buying mechanisms, right? They were meant to set back Russian plans for renewed offensives in this area once the weather improved. Now, Russia endured those counterattacks. They were forced back a step or two in certain places, and they have quickly now taken all of those back. And what we're seeing right now is a renewed, I don't want to say an offensive, a renewed offensive pressure all along the contact line that is showing very good results in several places. One of those places is in the south, in the Zaporozhye region, where Russia is having some breakthroughs in the Kiev regime's defenses, moving towards Orehov. Orehov is a town, small city in the Zaporozhye region. That's where the Kiev regime launched the NATO-planned, ill-fated 2023 summer offensive out of. And by reports I've seen, it's generally considered it's going to be a hard place to defend. And Russians have had breakthroughs in the outer defenses on the way there. And if Orehov is taken, or the Kiev regime forces have to fall back from there, the road is right open to Zaporozhye city, right? Which is surely the intention of the Russians. Now let's jump to the top. That's the southmost of the theater. Let's jump to the upper point. Russia has essentially finished up the Kiev's Kursk incursion and their attempted Belgorod incursion. The Kiev regime forces right on the border had ensconced themselves in a walled monastery, which they held for about another week. And Russian forces have now taken that monastery back after failing to negotiate the Kiev regime's forces their surrender. They were cut off. They were surrounded. There was actually an officer who was negotiating their surrender, and evidently he was killed by someone else among the forces. So that saw the end of it there. So the Kursk is beaten back. Now what Russia is doing is expanding into the Sumy region of Ukraine. So finished up Kursk and just kept going into Ukraine. And Putin has spoken about creating a buffer zone there. The first primary target will be a town by the name of Yelizavetka. And once Yelizavetka is taken, you're right on to Sumy City, the regional capital. And if Sumy City is taken, that's the road straight to Kiev. Right. This is where one of the directions that Russia moved on Kiev in the very beginning in 22, raced through Sumy and down towards Kiev. And reportedly, again, the Kiev regime just does not have adequately prepared defensive on the outskirts of Sumy. They're already beginning the evacuation of the city. They're talking about the evacuation of the government, of the regime administration, but also of civilians. And Russia is building up forces to the west of the Sumy region, to the Bryansk region, right? And the Bryansk region is another way with it that the Russian forces in the beginning came down towards Kiev. So Russia is obviously seeking to increase the contact line, to put pressure on the Kiev regime from the north, to stretch their forces out even more thin, and potentially to be able to surge forces down to Kiev. So that's all in the way on the north. So we see pressure from the north, from the south. Right now, I would say that is offensive pressure. But we could see in the coming weeks a major new offensive push from either one or both of those directions. We're talking tens of thousands of new troops being committed, fully kitted out to those areas. Now, Russia is also having success in the Kharkov region. Russia has finally reactivated the kind of frozen front in the northern Kharkov region in the area of Volchansk. They've surged across the Volchansk River, and they're making good progress moving towards the south. At the same time, Russian forces have broken through Kiev regime defenses on the outskirts of Kupiansk. Their Kiev regime forces are reeling and trying to set up a new defense. Now, if Russian forces are able to take Kupiansk, Liman, and Izium, right? These are three settlements in that area of southern Kharkov and the northern, towards the northern Donbas area. The Russian forces were forced to withdraw from in the autumn of 22 when Russia didn't send enough forces initially into the conflict because they were counting on a political settlement. The Kiev regime lured them along with the Istanbul communique. They got weapons from the West, started their mobilization and conscription, and then Russian forces were left, we've got more territory and not enough troops to hold it, more troops territory than we can hold in the south and in the north in the Kharkov region. And we need to begin mobilization because obviously this is going to be a real war. Well, they withdrew. They withdrew in good order. They withdrew from Kharkov in the north. They withdrew from Kherson city in the south. Well, now Russia is back. And they're moving at taking Kupiansk, Liman, and Izium. And if they're able to do that, that will set up the northern approach to the Kiev regime's last defensive line in the Donbas region. That is the Slavyansk, Kramatorsk, Konstantinovka line. So if Russia takes Liman and Izium, then they'll be able to move down on Slavyansk from the topographically higher territory to the north of it there, and that will, really ease the taking of that last defensive line. At the same time, Russian forces are mopping up what's left in Chasiv Yar and surging forth out of the Toretsk area into the south of that defensive line, right? Into the outskirts of Konstantinovka right now. And again, they're having, I would say, quicker success than many expected there as well. Kiev regime forces are reeling under the assault there as well. So in the Donbas, they're already moving on this last defensive line from the north, from the south, and they'll be moving from the east as well. So they'll be moving on that last defensive line in the summer from three different directions at the same time. Now, the last two settlements of note in the Donbas region beside that defensive line are Pokrovsk in the south, what was once a logistics and trade hub, logistics and supply hub. transportation hub, and Seversk in the north of the Donetsk region, which is really just a geographically tough to take fortified area. Russia's been battering their heads in one form or another against Seversk for 2 years. Now Russia has both of those two settlements in pinchers, which means they're choking off the supply routes. And it's very significant, such that, the Kiev regime forces are talking about critical situations in both of those. So we see that this year, at a minimum, right, by the end of the year, the Donbas, the Donetsk region, and Lugansk is already effectively taken. Donetsk region will be finished up. Russia's set everything in motion. But they're also going to be moving into the Dnepropetrovsk region, which they're only a couple kilometers away from right now. They'll be surging further towards Zaporozhye city in the south. They'll be moving, they'll have most of the Kharkov region except for Kharkov city itself, which will be increasingly isolated. And they'll be moving down from the north into the Sumy and Bryansk region. Pressure all along the contact line, right? And good gains everywhere right now. And I would say that the peak of Russia's offensive is still weeks away. We're going to see a big surge in 1 or maybe 2, possibly even 3 of those areas. Wherever the Kiev regime is weakest, wherever they show the weakest, that is where Russia will surge their offensive towards. And that has yet to come. So it's looking very bad for the Kiev regime all across the battlefield. They don't have the manpower. They're not getting any new arms packages from the United States. They're getting promises from European countries, but it's not doing much. And the trickle that they're getting now from the long-term contracts that the Biden administration signed, with the U.S. military-industrial complex for Ukraine, it's providing, sustenance, but it's not enough. It's nowhere near enough, and the Europeans can't make up enough. So the situation is really bad for them in armaments and manpower. They have attempted to. They're really failing on the mobilization, i.e. conscription front, still doing the mass forced conscription with press gangs and the like. They attempted to lure 18 to 25-year-olds to voluntarily sign up with a slick advertising campaign, a $24,000 sign-up bonus, and then some weird commercial that was going on about how many Big Macs at McDonald's that could buy. Are you people crazy? I'm just like, I guess that's the headspace that they inhabit. It's Western fetishism, even at that point. In almost 3 months of that campaign with that bonus, they've admitted now it's a complete failure. They had less than 500 people, 18 to 25-year-olds, who were stupid enough to sign up voluntarily for this, right? And the first 2 that I saw that did, one a man and one a woman, are both already dead. So they didn't even get the full training.
Mark, because earlier you were saying there are thousands of Russians who want to sign up for the SMO. Yes. And now you're telling me that Ukraine is having difficulty mobilizing hundreds, less than that?
Yes, that is a discrepancy that will grudgingly be admitted to, with all kinds of caveats hidden in 3rd and 4th paragraphs in the Western media. Yes, Russians are very eager and very much believe in the SMO. Yes, they're getting good pay, good benefits, bonuses and everything, but there is societal approval. Meanwhile, the Kiev regime has to resort to this weird ad campaigns that don't work and press gang conscription, and they're not able to meet their requirements. A German researcher at a German military think tank just put out an assessment of both sides, manpower situations, and talked about how the Kiev regime is failing to conscript, failing to conscript replacement rate every month. Meanwhile, more Russians than ever are signing up to serve in the SMO. Their numbers have gone up to now according to German, again, researchers, some 1,400 a month. 1,400 a month. Now, every month. Now, let's say that Russian casualties, dead and wounded that can't quickly return to the front, are 400 a day. Let's just toss that out there. That means that the Russian military in the SMO, right, just the SMO forces, is getting 1,000 bigger every single day. That is the scope of the awakened Russian behemoth that is, lurching forward now, right? It's been this slow grinding war of attrition, but now there's just mass and a heavily attrited and deteriorated NATO-backed Kiev regime forces on the other side. It is looking more and more just in inevitability, right? And I think there is the Americans are slowly coming around to admitting this, right? Rubio spoke that if they can't get a diplomatic settlement soon, then the U.S. may have to move on.
Yeah, let me actually pull that up. This is directly after having talks with Sergei Lavrov as well. So here we go.
So we need to determine very quickly now, and I'm talking about a matter of days, whether or not this is doable in over the next few weeks. If it is, we're in. If it's not, then we have other priorities to focus on as well.
I think this exposes a very fundamental aspect of what's been going on here, especially in these U.S.-Russia talks, which is that Russia has the cards and the U.S. doesn't really have any to pressure Russia into anything.
Yeah, the U.S. has no cards left to play. However, grudgingly, the Trump administration has started in fits and starts to admit that. They're blustering against Iran, right? I don't think they want a war there, but they have that is at least a possibility. I don't think either the U.S. or Iran want a war at this stage. So I think that will more than the highest probability is that will be settled diplomatically without that being a certainty. But that is also prerequisite on that the ethnic cleansing of the Palestinians from Palestine will occur as that happens, right? But let's leave that to the side. And the other priority is, of course, China. And every U.S. president since Obama has been wanting to militarily and economically pivot to confront China, but always been caught up with Russia and Ukraine or the Middle East and not failed to get there. So the Trump administration, Trump has nothing but contempt for Zelensky and the regime there, as he does for the European leaders. He doesn't much care about Ukraine, right? It's just that he's the U.S. president, and now he owns this war, even if he's trying to pretend like he's some uninterested third-party arbiter or something like that, right? This is the U.S. losing their proxy war, which Rubio himself admitted was a proxy war just a couple months ago. But they're leaving themselves space at this point. They're realizing that they can't force a deal on Russia on U.S. terms that will preserve the Kiev regime there, and something that the Kiev regime and the Europeans will agree to. The Europeans aren't going to agree to anything, right? They want to continue this conflict. They want to keep trying to prop up the Kiev regime, if necessary, for the next 4 years, and hope against hope that in 4 years, J.D. Vance is, not elected, or God Emperor Trump doesn't come into being, and that they might get a Democrat or a more traditional neocon Republican in there. They're willing to hope for that, or hope for some black swan event and continue the conflict. And now the Trump administration is creating themselves space. If they can't force a deal that they can, however grudgingly admit to on the Russians, then they may they're starting to signal at least that they're considering walking away. Trump wiping his hands of the whole affair, saying, I tried, they don't want peace, they can't work with Zelensky, the Europeans are defying me. And this is all Biden's war anyway, right? That will be the out. He says that every single time that he talks about this. If I had been president, the election hadn't been rigged and stolen from me, right, then this war would have happened because Putin would have been afraid of me, or whatever is going on in his head. Never mind the fact, of course, that he has also bragged about providing javelins to the Kiev regime that destroyed Russian tanks in the initial conflict, and about all the sanctions that he leveled against Russia. He had nothing to do with it. All right. So Russia is willing to let him have this pose as a third party at this point, as long as he either agrees to the Russian terms or walks away. Right. They're willing to allow him to save that much face by not contradicting him on that. Doesn't mean they're going to give him any concessions in a diplomatic settlement towards that regard, but they're willing to allow him to continue to play this. Oh, I tried to bring peace between these two warring countries, rather than my country lost the proxy war that we, according again to the New York Times, was involved in, from the strategic to the operational to a tactical level, to such a degree that it is essentially incorrect to even call it a proxy war. It was, the only thing the Ukrainians were doing was the dying, and that only the majority of it. That's been admitted by the New York Times. And the British had to chime in a week later and within the Telegraph and say, "Oh, and we were just as involved," right? Yes. Because they felt left out in the credit, I guess, right? So that's so British, such a yapping.